Brian Kelly's been maintaining Lou Holtz type of standards the past few years at Notre Dame. We will talk some Notre Dame football coming up here with Ben Belden from Slap the Sign. We, of course, encourage you to help us build the channel for the best discussion, debate, and analysis of college football. If you grab the Amazon link in the description section below, just do your regular shopping right there. It doesn't cost you an extra penny. Also, we have 2 exclusive live streams available each and every week in which we react to your viewer comments, and also in which I bring you on to talk college football with me. And let's talk some Notre Dame with Ben. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing well. I'm breaking in a new puppy. I got a new black lab that I named Rocket after Rocket Ishmael. So right before you called, I was trying to get him settled and in a crate and far enough away from the microphone that we can't hear him barking in the background. So hopefully I've succeeded in that.
Though Rocket is not your favorite player of all time, because we covered that ground.
That is true. It was just a good dog name.
It's a great name.
Yeah, and Notre Dame themed. And my other dog's name is Rudy. So kind of decided, I thought Rocket and Rudy went pretty well together. So
absolutely,
that's kind of where that came from.
All right. Well, there aren't necessarily any Rockets on this squad in regards to sheer speed, but the receiving core has been mighty good in recent years and consistently with 3 or 4 options that are very athletic and NFL type of players. And we've seen that in recent years. You lose some of those guys. You bring back an offensive line with 4 starters. And, of course, once Ian Book took the reins last year, it was a pretty prolific offense at 37-plus points per game. So let's start with Mr. Book and anything he can improve and take us through the offense.
Yeah, I mean, for starting with Ian Book, I think probably the big thing that he needs to improve and has worked on is his field throwing ability. If you watched them play Clemson, which most people did, they sat on some of those shorter routes, and then he wasn't real comfortable going downfield. And then when he was looking too long and taking sacks and all of that stuff. And that's sort of where things really went badly for Notre Dame's offense in the Cotton Bowl. So the accuracy downfield, he's a very good, short, accurate thrower, but moving the ball, pushing the ball down the field is something that, the offense needs better this year. And he's obviously at the forefront of that, and something that he's, from all accounts has been working on, and something that hopefully that Notre Dame can build upon this year, and because they're going to need to have a better offense than they did last year to have the same type of success.
Yeah, with the win totals hitting 10 plus the past 2 years, that's the first time that's happened since Lou Holtz was on the sideline. And and basically the talent upgrade across the board has been pretty substantial. There's always NFL players on a roster like Notre Dame's, but the number of them at the levels have certainly been evident on the defense playing much better in recent years. And as I mentioned, the receivers being much better. And then the offensive line as well. Again, always a strong point for Notre Dame football teams for the most part. But over the last few years, just exceptional offensive line play. And more so than the last couple of years, you bring most of those guys back.
Right. They lost, obviously, the big ones, McGlinchey and Quentin Nelson 2 years ago. And this year they're bringing back, like you said, 4 out of 5. They're replacing pretty much their center, and that's about it. Some of the guys that played last year, for instance, right guard Tommy Kramer the things that you hear about Kramer is that, he has really, I guess, improved on his agility, his maneuverability, his ability to get out in front of plays and, pull and block and do all that type of thing. So those things are improved for him. The depth is there and all of that. If the offensive line is pretty healthy, then they're going to be better than last year. 2 years ago, they were really good. Last year, they were pretty okay. And then this year might be another year where you're talking about, another all-American type of offensive line, I guess, to use that term. And they're going to have some good backs to block for. Dexter Williams is gone, but Jafar Armstrong, who's a wide receiver turned running back, was kind of his backup. He's the same type of player, has learned to be a running back and to get a little lower, get his pads lower and that type of thing. He's got track speed. So he's kind of the speed guy. They're bringing back Tony Jones Jr., who is kind of going to be the number 2 back. He's going into his senior year after redshirting his freshman year. So he's really got 2 years of eligibility left if he decides to stay, which I think he probably will. And then, a host of younger guys, behind that. But I think Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame struggled with balance and predictability at certain times last year. And I think now they've got a complement they've got a quarterback in Ian Book who can throw the ball all over the place and is going to be better throwing the ball downfield. They're going to have an experienced offensive line, good running backs, receivers, kind of, an interesting talking point. I mean, Chase Claypool was highly touted when he was brought in. He'll be the number one guy. He was second on Notre Dame in receptions last year. I want to say he had somewhere in the ballpark of 50 receptions and 600 or 700 yards or something like that. It'll be interesting to see if he can really step into being that number one guy the way that Miles Boykin did for Notre Dame last year. And then it'll also be interesting to see, Chris Fink is one of the better slot receivers in the country. And then it'll be interesting to see like who on the other side of Claypool emerges and, what kind of depth Notre Dame is able to use with the receiver. There's just a whole host of guys, Kevin Austin, Javon McKinley, guys that I'm forgetting their names right now off the top of my head. But just a whole host of guys that are going to be looking for playing time outside of, the top guy who is Claypool.
Yeah, Claypool caught 50, Fink 49 last year. They combined for 6 touchdowns. Then you also have this Michael Young kid who seems to have some decent speed.
Right. And he had a pretty good freshman year. And then I don't want to say he took a step back, but he didn't necessarily make the same strides that people expected him to in his sophomore year. Now with 2 years under the program, a lot of people will say that players make the biggest jump between years 2 and 3 in college football, or really most college athletics. So that's kind of the hope for him as well. He might be the guy that emerges on the other side as Claypool.
So Jafar Armstrong, as you mentioned, he moves over from wide receiver, and he was a running back last year, but that was his initial move that he made. So you got to figure that the receiving skills out of the backfield are going to be a plus. Is he ready to take on more responsibility? And then you've got, of course, you got Tony Jones as well, who's been productive, spelling him.
Yeah, I think, Jafar Armstrong had kind of a, I don't want to call it a freak knee injury, but an atypical knee injury with just kind of some weird swelling and a little minor procedure he had to have in the middle of last year that really kind of took away from his carries, which was actually ended up being fine, because whenever that happened to him, that was when Dexter Williams was coming back from suspension. It'll be interesting to see. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Is he ready to be the number one back? I'm not sure. He's going to have to be, but it'll be interesting to see how he holds up throughout the season. Obviously, we hope that he holds up pretty well, but Tony Jones Jr. I think he's a real solid number 2. Behind him is a guy named Jameer Smith, who will be a sophomore that looks really good in the spring. And he's a guy that I'm excited about. He's kind of in the same mold as Tony Jones, similar size, a little bit more of a bowling ball type of mentality, whereas Jafar Armstrong's really more of like the speed guy. But they've got guys at running back that if Jafar Armstrong goes down, that the drop off isn't going to be real significant, I don't think.
And Ben, of course, it's Notre Dame, so you've got a tight end or 2.
Right.
Always have tight ends that can play.
Yeah. Right. Cole Kmet, who has decided he was a really good baseball player, a pitcher as well, and decided to kind of focus more on football this year. Alize Mack has gone to the NFL, and Cole Kmet was kind of his backup, but he's stepping into, that role. He too is going to be a junior. And like I kind of keep saying, the expectation is that guys make that big jump from just kind of a background type player to the forefront between their sophomore and junior seasons. And that hopefully is the case for Cole Kmet. I've heard people say that he is as good as or better than Tyler Eifert. And if he has that type of year, he could be a first or second round draft pick if he decides to leave early. So a guy that hasn't done it yet, who's shown, once in a while the ability to make kind of a really cool big play, but hasn't done it consistently. That's Cole Kmet in a nutshell. And, hopefully this year is, the breakout year for him.